Listen to a conversation between a student and a professor.
Sandy, how's class been going for you this semester?
Oh, it's great. I really like your business psychology class, but I have one major concern about the last assignment. You know, the one where we have to interview a local business owner, entrepreneur.
Are you having trouble coming up with interview questions?
Well, that's just it. I worked on my high school newspaper for years, so I actually have great questions to ask. The thing is, I'm new to the area, and I don't know people off campus. So I was wondering could you possibly give me the name of someone I could interview?
You don't know anyone who owns a business?
Well, yeah, back home. My next-door neighbors. They own a shoe store, and they're really successful, but they're not local.
Well, it wouldn't be fair to the other students if I gave you the name of a contact, but I could help you figure out a way to find someone on your own. Let's see, do you read the local newspaper?
Sure, whenever I have the time.
Well, the business section in the paper often has stories about local business people who've been successful. If you find an article, you could call the person who's profiled.
You mean just call them up out of the blue and ask them if they'll talk to me?
Sure, why not?
Well, aren't people like that awfully busy? Too busy to talk to a random college student?
Many people enjoy telling the story of how they got started. Remember, this is a business psychology class, and for this assignment, I want you to get some real insight about business owners, their personality, what drives them to become an entrepreneur.
Like how they think.
And what motivates them. Why did they start their business? I'm sure they'd talk to you, especially if you tell them you might start a business someday.
I'm not sure I'd have the guts to do that. Opening a business seems so risky, so scary.
Well, you can ask them if they felt that way too. Now you just need to find someone to interview to see if your instincts are correct.
Listen again to part of the conversation, then answer the question.
Are you having trouble coming up with interview questions?
Well, that's just it. I worked on my high school newspaper for years, so I actually have great questions to ask.
What does the student imply? Listen to part of a lecture in an anthropology class.
Okay, I want to begin today by talking about calendars. I know some of you are thinking it's not all that fascinating, right? But listen, the next time you look at a calendar, I want you to keep something in mind. There are at least 3 natural ways of measuring the passage of time: by day, by month, and by year. And these are all pretty easy to see, right? A day is based on one rotation of Earth. A month is how long the moon takes to move around the Earth. And a year is the time it takes for Earth to move around the sun, right? So they're all based on natural events. But the natural clocks of Earth, the moon, and the sun run on different times. And you can't divide any one of these time periods by another one without having some messy fraction left over. One lunar month, that's the time it takes for the moon to go around Earth. 1 month is about 29.5 days. Not really a nice round number. And 1 year is a little more than 365 days. So these are obviously numbers that don't divide into each other very neatly. And this makes it pretty difficult to create some sort of tidy calendar that really works. Not that different cultures haven't tried. Have any of you ever been to Stonehenge? No? You know that amazing circle of giant stones in England? Well, if you ever go and find yourself wondering why this culture, way back in prehistoric England, would go to so much work to construct this monumental ring of enormous stones, well, keep in mind that a lot of us think it was designed, at least partially, as a calendar, to mark when the seasons of the year begin, according to the exact day when the sun comes up from a particular direction. I have colleagues who insist it's a temple, maybe, or a tomb, but they can't deny that it was also used as a calendar, probably to help figure out, for example, when farmers should begin their planting each year. The Mayans in Central America also invented a calendar, but for a different purpose. The Mayans, especially the royalty and priests, wanted to look at long cycles of history. So the calendar they used had to be able to count far into the future as well as far into the past. And not only were the Mayans keeping track of the natural timekeepers we mentioned before, Earth, the Moon, and the Sun, but another natural timekeeper, the planet Venus. Venus rises in the sky as the morning star every 584 days, and the Venus cycle was incorporated in the Mayan calendar. So the Mayans kept track of long periods of time, and they did it so accurately, in fact, that their calendar is considered about as complicated and sophisticated as any in the world. Now, the ancient Chinese believed very strongly in astrology, the idea that you can predict future events based on the positions of the stars and planets, like, say, Jupiter. Incidentally, the whole Chinese system of astrology was based on the fact that the planet Jupiter goes around the Sun once every 12 years. So one orbit of Jupiter lasts 12 of our Earth years. Apparently, that's why the Chinese calendar has a cycle of 12 years. You know, like the year of the dragon, the year of the tiger, and so on. All parts of a 12-year astrological cycle that we get from the orbit of Jupiter. Calendars based on the orbits of other planets, though, are a lot less common than those based on the cycle of the moon, the lunar month. I could mention any number of important cultures around the world that have depended on lunar calendars, but there really isn't time. So let's go right to the calendar that's now used throughout most of the world, a solar calendar, based on the number of days in a year. This calendar is mainly derived from the one the ancient Romans devised a couple thousand years ago. I mean, the Romans, with more than a little help from the Greeks, realized that a year actually lasts about 365 1/4 days. And so they decided to round off most years to 365 days, but make every fourth year into a leap year. I mean, somehow you have to account for that extra 1/4 of a day each year. So every 4 years, they made the calendar 1 day longer. By adding the leap year, the Romans were able to make a calendar that worked so well that with a few minor adjustments, this calendar is still widely used today.
Listen to part of a lecture in a biology class.
We've been discussing animal communication. Today we're going to talk about dolphins. Now, dolphins make a wide range of communicative sounds and also display something called vocal learning, which is the ability of an animal to modify its vocalizations based on its experience with other animals. There are many types of dolphin vocalizations. We still don't know their precise meanings. Partly, I suppose, because we haven't really tried that hard to figure out their precise meanings. But we do know that dolphins use vocalizations as a way of communicating with one another. And we've categorized their vocalizations into 3 types: whistles, clicks, and burst pulses. The dolphin whistles are very high-frequency sounds, partially above the range of human hearing. What's fascinating is each dolphin has a signature whistle, which is unique to each individual dolphin. It allows them to call to and identify each other. Jennifer?
Kind of like learning someone's name? So do dolphin parents choose names for their children?
Well, again, that's something we don't know, but we do know that no 2 signature whistles sound identical. And members of the same family, their signature whistles have similar elements. Dolphins use them as contact calls. They call to each other while traveling and foraging. It helps keep the group together and helps mothers and children find each other. Think of it like if you were traveling in the forest with one other person who was just out of sight, you'd call out, "Are you there?" and the other person would respond. But if there were several people in the forest, you would have to call that person's name to call to them. In addition to whistles, dolphins produce clicks, which are actually sonar or sound waves. They use the clicks to communicate, but more importantly, to navigate and hunt. How? Well, the sonar clicks bounce off objects, and then the dolphins convert the incoming signals into a three-dimensional picture, a mental map of what's around them. The clicks are extremely sensitive and accurate. The sonar clicks are also very strong. And there's this theory that one reason dolphins swim side by side is to avoid interference from each other's sonar clicks. Interference would be confusing. It would prevent them from getting an accurate picture of their surroundings. And what's interesting is dolphins will turn off their sonar when another dolphin passes in front. The third category of dolphin vocalizations is burst pulses. These are all the other sounds that dolphins make, like squawks, squeals, barks, groans, and so on. Burst pulses are used to display aggression, show dominance, and attract a mate. But whistles, clicks, and burst pulses aren't the only ways dolphins communicate. Does anyone remember any other ways?
In the book, it said that they also slap their tails against the water. Oh, and the air that comes out when they breathe or whistle, the bubble streams, they can control how the air bubbles come out. I thought that was really interesting.
Yes, the bubble streams are very interesting. Dolphins can identify and locate each other by their bubble streams, and they can imitate the bubble stream patterns of other dolphins, sort of like saying hello. So, as you can see, dolphins use many different sounds and behaviors to convey messages to each other. I'd like to tell you about when I was a graduate student, and I spent one summer on a boat in the Atlantic Ocean studying marine life. One morning there were about 25 dolphins swimming with the boat. We could hear their clicks and whistles as they called to each other. Now, we were there as impartial scientists to do research. But how could we not notice the beauty as the bubble streams made patterns in the water and the dolphins appeared to dance and play? It's wonderful when you do fieldwork and actually experience something you've been studying in a classroom. So if you ever have the opportunity, go for it.
Listen again to part of the lecture. Then answer the question.
Think of it like if you were traveling in the forest with one other person who was just out of sight, you'd call out, "Are you there?" And the other person would respond. But if there were several people in the forest, you would have to call that person's name to call to them.
What does this example illustrate?